Let's talk cleanup. This is a big old mess, just returning that small vessel the other day, and I'm going to show you how I do my cleanup. So first I start with a tray. These are just bin lids, and I move all the tools over to the fresh clean one. That leaves the chips behind between them. Additionally, you can see when you're sweeping things up like this, the large pieces hook onto each other and they can kind of make a mess and start dragging more than you intend to move. So usually I start by actually picking these up with gloves, just like that. And I also want to talk about, if you're ever planning on getting into metal lathing or machining, you really have to have a plan for your chips. One of the main reasons I like working with aluminum and brass is I can recycle it in my own foundry on site and create new bars to turn. More on that a little later. Primarily I use this small angled broom to clean up the workspace, and this happens in a few stages. I will generally go over the same area a few times, and then I move on to the lathe and start cleaning these slides. It's very important to keep this space clean between work, since it's the slide that the tool head slides up and back on. So once I get it cleared off, I sort of sweep out this back half, and I believe off camera I already did one pass because it's normally not that clean. But you can see once the slide is clean, we're able to maneuver that down, and we'll be able to now do the full chip tray as well as finish out up top. I usually just sweep this directly onto the table, as it makes it easier to sweep up than once we clear the tray. This is why I choose to use an angled broom, because I'm able to reach underneath the lathe and pull out all of these chips. And then from there we can just grab the big ones just like before from both of the piles. You can see all the little pieces that came with. It's kind of what I was talking about. Then we just continue to sweep everything out. Now the craziest part is you will end up cleaning when you're doing a project like this over the same area several times. You could plan to make it a little bit better, but I found that it doesn't end up saving all that much time. Here I'm just brooming off the threads. This screw is super important because it connects to the gearbox and allows you to do things like single point threading and other semi-automated options. And you don't want to get that all gummed up, or you can run into issues from operations. Now the lathe weighs about 90 pounds, but that is exactly why I didn't bolt it to the chip tray. I'm able to lift one side at a time, so it's not too bad. It is rather heavy, especially on the other business end, but I can clean out the chips a little bit better, and it just makes for a little bit more cohesive cleanup. Now you can see here, this gets a little tedious because you're just pretty much repeating the same steps and brooming out all of these aluminum chips and dusts or whatever metal you're working. I do, like I mentioned in a previous video, like aluminum a little bit more because it doesn't seem to stick to oily surfaces or stick around in general as much. And it tends to string more than splinter, like the brass. Now, I'm still cleaning out underneath there, and here in a second we're going to lift up the business end of the lathe and do a final sweep under there, which you can see right here. Now this is probably, I would guess, 70 pounds of the 90 on that end. So that's definitely the hardest part. It's not the worst thing in the world, really. Just the cleanup in general is a lot of work because you have to do this almost every piece you turn if you're turning anything that's semi-sizable. Alright, so here is the fume extractor that I use as a kind of makeshift dust collector. It works really great, honestly. So every time I clean this out, you can see all this stuff that gets caught up in there, including chips. I'll pop it at the end and then dump it in the respective metal box. So I keep all of my chips separated as possible, at least for the 6160 aluminum and the brass, so I'm able to recycle it later, as I was talking about. But here I'm just kind of carefully brushing out the chips, and then I'll kind of lightly tap there. Now I'm wearing breathing protection the whole time I do cleanup as well, because you create a lot of dust. And I try to get that as clean as possible. Now what I ended up doing was using my violent fan, as they call it, here in a second, to blow this out a little bit better outside. just to make sure that we're keeping things as clean as possible. Once I'm done with that, replace that in there and put the whole thing back together. This system, I believe I only spent about 60 bucks on it. It might not be the best thing in the whole wide world, but I also wear breathing protection myself. So I kind of like to use both systems just to make sure we're getting less metal dust in the air. Here in a second, I'll show you the breathing system that I wear. Now, this is a small, silly system. It just uses KN95 masks, but the N95 mask is mostly for directing the positive air that goes through the actual true HEPA filter. Now here I'm just blowing off everything on the lathe to get any chips that were stuck anywhere that we missed, and just clear out things one final time. I'm also blowing off the little cabinets and tools nearby, and this more or less helps me get stuff that's stuck in little cracks and stuff, and it's kind of like the final pass before the final sweep. After I finish this and blow off the whole desk and everything, I'll end up sweeping one final time, and that will leave us with a nice, perfect workspace to once again pick things back up. It's also super important to make sure you're getting in those motion points, like the slide that this tooling head moves up and back on, and also the tooling head itself. Just kind of work everything out of the nooks and crannies that it's stuck in or hiding in, and give us a clean workspace to move forward. Now I will also eventually wipe this whole head down with a oily cloth to remove any fine dust and debris, and then I do that kind of the same when I go to oil the machine as well. But by doing this, we can get all the chips out of here and make sure that we're in good working order for the next job, and keep our workspace clean. Now, I'm not going to go into floor cleanup, but you can see it's a complete disaster as well. This is how I store the aluminum shavings and brass shavings, just in these little box caddies. I usually stomp them down and they're ready to go to the foundry. Sneak peek for next video, you can see all this slop. I need to get this cleaned up because we can in no way make precise parts with this kind of movement.